This program may contain material which is not suitable for all audiences. Parental discretion is advised. Howdy, I'm Doc Hanna. I smoke cigars and I know things. Welcome back. On this edition of I Smoke Cigars and I Know Things, the podcast, I issue an apology. We look for a good $5 cigar and the Rona war is over. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. So let's get started. Starting my day here with a cup of Dallas Brothers deep, dark roast coffee. A birthday gift from my amazing wife. Fantastic, rich, full-bodied dark coffee. It's really, really great. And looking for a cigar to pair with it. Now, I'm not some Instagram influencer who's having beer cans with my picture on it sent to me by Bud Light. So I need to find an affordable but tasty cigar. Now, in the past, I've done the search for the best motorcycle cigar. I've done a search for the best bargain cigar, and with different results, because some cigars do have consistency issues. But over the years, I have come back to the same line of cigars again and again, found them to be tasty and consistent. And that's what we're going to have today. Today it is the Flor de Oliva Corojo Churchill. Now, Flor de Oliva is made by Oliva, one of the giants in the cigar industry, and their everyday cigar, their sub $5 or $6 cigar, the Flor de Olivas, they are consistently good. And they have cigars that will match your flavor profile affordably. They have a Connecticut. They have a Corojo, which I'm going to smoke today. They have a Maduro, and they have a natural or broadleaf wrapper. They're all good, and they're all different enough from each other. They resemble some of Oliva's more expensive offerings. Well, today it's the Corojo. This is a Nicaraguan puro, which means all of the leaf comes from the same country. The wrapper on this Corojo is reddish brown. The color, they call it, is Colorado. Now, I've been to Colorado, and I haven't seen that shade of red, but that means something somewhere, because they're not the only company to use Colorado to describe that particular reddish color. I know I speak fluid Texican, but Colorado doesn't mean red, at least down in Texas. Well, this cigar, construction is very good. An even reddish brown wrapper. It is slightly springy to the touch with no air pockets or firm spots in it. The cap on it is very nicely made. Giving it a V cut, and now the light, I get those familiar notes, slight spice underneath, earth, slightly sweet, at least at first, and I'll tell you more about this cigar as we go along. You know, I mentioned a minute ago, I'm not a famous Instagram influencer, so I don't have money just to burn. So when I'm going to burn one, I'm always happy to find an affordable cigar. About 100 years ago, the Vice President of the United States, Thomas Marshall, was famously quoted as saying, "What this country really needs is a good 5-cent cigar." Now, he was reportedly replying to a Kansas senator by the name of Joseph Bristow, who got on the floor of the Senate and read off a laundry list of what this country really needs. Now, this was in the period before the United States had entered World War I, and that was following a recession that actually turned into a small depression. that had been corrected by market forces prior to the massive expenditure of money and the price controls that occurred in World War I. But they were looking ahead. The Lend-Lease program had already been in place. American ships and firearms and war material were being lent to Great Britain to fight the war. At that point, World War I was kind of a proxy war for the United States. Joseph Bristow from Kansas got up on the Senate floor and gave his speech. What this country needs is, what this country needs is, what this country needs is 2, 3, 4, 5 things. Vice President Thomas Marshall, President pro tem of the Senate, was well known around Washington for his sense of humor. In fact, he was so well known by his sense of humor, which I'm guessing was not well received, except I didn't have to guess because Woodrow Wilson hated him for it. He thought he was vulgar. His wife thought that Marshall was vulgar, that he was crass, because he dared to make jokes on the floor of the Senate. Now, they disliked him so much that they excluded him from briefings, from information. They even kept him in the dark after Wilson had a stroke that put him out of commission for the end of his presidency and for the almost entirely year after the First World War. At that time, the president's wife and the senior advisors were really running the country, and they kept Marshall in the dark. But Marshall, what this country really needs is a good 5-cent cigar. Well, the days of the 5-cent cigar are long gone. Today, manufacturing a cigar at the low end takes $1.50 to $2.50 a stick for the tobacco alone. The labor, boxing, transportation, retail costs drive up the costs of cigars considerably, as you know. A good cigar, $7, $8, $10. A really great cigar like a Padron or a Davidoff, if that's where your tastes run, $30, $40, depending on the market. Well, for a working man like me, and I'm guessing like you, it's a jewel. It's a treat to find an affordable cigar you can smoke regularly for $5 or less. And that's what we have with the Flor de Olivas. At retail at the Outlaw Cigar Company in Overland Park, the shop that I kind of make my home, it's in the $4.50 to $5.50 range for the Flor de Olivas. Depending on where your tastes run, again, that lighter Connecticut or the fuller-bodied Maduro, there's a cigar there that's going to work for you. Thomas Marshall would approve of the FDO Corojo, I do believe. The man liked his cigars, liked him enough to talk about him on the Senate floor. And I like this Corojo. Slightly sweet earthiness, a little bit of Nicaraguan spice, particularly on the retrohale. It's an even burn. Don't have to do any touch-ups. It holds together well. And it's just a really good everyday cigar. It's good for getting together with your buddies, particularly if your buddies aren't big cigar guys. Hand them one of these, they'll enjoy it, and it won't break your bank. Keep some in your humidor so that on days like this when you're doing some work and having a cigar, working in the yard, sitting out in the sunshine, and you're not inclined to have one of those really, really expensive cigars, this is a great, great option. Man, I like this. And I'll tell you what, I really like it with the coffee. As you know, I'm a black coffee guy. In fact, my Facebook posts, you'll always see that I have a big-ass mug of black coffee, and it's different coffee blends when I can get them. And this cigar is going really well with this coffee. Excuse me while I take a drink. Ah, my, oh my. Well, as I said, I owe you an apology. In our last episode, titled Beer and the Culture War, I talked about a certain personality, shall we say, on Instagram, who is at the center of the current firestorm with Anheuser-Busch and Bud Light beer. In that episode, I referred to that individual as Dylan Mulroney. Well, I was mistaken. It's Dylan Mulvaney. Mulvaney, not Mulroney. And so I apologize to everyone on earth whose last name is Mulroney. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to lump you in with this person. Mulroney is a proud Irish name. And in fact, there was a Prime Minister of Canada by the name of Mulroney. And even though I've never met you and I'm not entirely sure you're still alive, I apologize to you too. Sorry, folks. Dylan Mulvaney, not Dylan Mulroney. When we return, the war against coronavirus is over. Did we win? Did we lose? Was it a draw? Was it an armistice? I don't think anybody really knows. You're listening to I Smoke Cigars and I Know Things, the podcast. I am Doc Hanna. Welcome back to I Smoke Cigars and I Know Things, the podcast. I'm Doc Hanna. Well, good news, my friends. The war on COVID-19 is over. There's dancing in the streets. Sailors are kissing nurses. No longer having to wear a mask, I guess, so grab your nurse and kiss her, right? Because the war is over. We won. Or did we? Let's turn back time, my friends. It's February 2020. Reports have come out of China about a mysterious disease that was transmitted by a bat or something. State governments and the federal government are starting to get scared. Governors and mayors are now instituting lockdowns, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. That was 39 months ago. 2 weeks to flatten the curve became 39 months. Now, as your humble podcaster, I was talking about the coronavirus lockdowns, mostly in a humorous way, from the very beginning. And from the beginning, I said that lockdowns won't work, that ultimately the disease will win. Because disease always wins. Nature always wins. Well, on April 11th of this year, President Biden signed a congressional resolution ending the coronavirus pandemic. Now, this legal declaration doesn't mean that COVID is no longer with us. No, it means that it is now endemic and not pandemic. So there are no parades in the streets. There are no flyovers. There's no victory celebration. Because, as in so many other modern wars, we didn't win the war. We just kind of declared that the war is over. Let's look at some other examples of the war on. The war on drugs. Guess what? Drugs won. We've been fighting the war on drugs since roughly 1910, with the initial demonization of cannabis and with the outlawing of heroin, cocaine without prescription. And here we are, and drugs won. Cannabis is legalized. It's socially acceptable. Heroin's almost quaint anymore because now we have fentanyl. Before fentanyl, we had OxyContin. Guess what, guys? Drugs won. The war on poverty. Back in the 1960s, Lyndon Johnson declared war on poverty. And now, 60 years later, Poverty's still going strong. The percentage of people that live hand to mouth is the same. The percentage of people that take government money is higher. Poverty, 1. The war on terror. On September 12th, 2001, President George W. Bush declared a war on terror. And the first thing he did was turn the power of the United States government against us, the citizens. Try to go through an airport. Ride a bus. Try to have some privacy online. And you will very quickly see that those wartime restrictions didn't do anything. Yeah, true. There have been no more airplanes flown into buildings, but we have expended trillions of dollars, thousands of lives, and an immeasurable amount of personal freedom to try and defeat an idea, not even ideology, just an idea. We've declared terror to be anything from Mexican drug cartels to some pissant hiding out in a cave in Afghanistan who shoots at his neighbor because he wants to protect his stash of whatever, of food, of goats, or of drugs. All of that is called terror. We now have the idea of domestic terror. Crime between one person and another can be labeled domestic terror and subject to all of this war on terror, prosecution, imprisonment, and asset forfeiture. Now, if the purpose of terror is to actually force the target population to be afraid and to change how they live their life, then by that metric, terror has won. Let's use the even more basic wartime idea that you go to war, you defeat the enemy, and you come home. Or you keep the enemy's land. War. Well, let's look at Iraq. We withdrew from Iraq, and the players who were arrayed against us in Iraq are still there. I don't think that means we won. In Afghanistan, we went, we fought, we occupied for a very long time, and then we got the hell out, leaving behind the same players. Now, nobody ever wins a war in Afghanistan. They've known that all the way back to Alexander the Great. But our government, in their infinite wisdom, defined war differently, and therefore, we didn't have to conquer the Afghans. We just had to leave and leave a mess behind. Well, the war on COVID. They didn't explicitly use the war, but they invoked emergency powers, the one step below wartime powers. And for 3 years and 3 months now, we have been under significant restrictions. Our businesses, our travel, our home lives, our schools, all under these basically wartime restrictions. And the Biden administration tucked tail and said, it's over. To be fair, it's not just the Biden administration. Congress passed a resolution saying the war against coronavirus is over. And Biden signed it, mostly because he had veto-proof majorities in Congress against him. He really had no choice. It would have looked bad for him to veto it and then Congress to override him. Well, let's call today VC Day, the victory against coronavirus. The only thing I can see that's different is when you go to the doctor or the hospital, you don't have to wear a mask anymore. I was recently hospitalized and I didn't have to wear a mask. Now, some of the staff members did. I noticed that that was the case. I asked one of my nurses about that, and she said that beginning on April 11th, for staff members, they were also allowed to opt out or to opt in depending on their personal conscience or if they'd had exposure and were recommended by their physician. It's a step up, but really that's no different than it was before. Now, a few years back, I was in Japan, and in Japan, the wearing of paper masks is common. And it's a thing now in the United States. Sometimes it's a fashion statement. Sometimes it's a political statement. For the most part, people have gotten away from it. I now have a dresser drawer full of bandanas and masks that, I used to blow my nose mostly. They do their job. So I won't get rid of them. But, we might have a museum of COVID someday with a collection of odd masks. In some of my podcasts back in the height of the pandemic lockdowns, I showed examples of goofy and weird mask options. One of them was someone who had taken a scuba mask and was using a scuba mask with a filter on top, the filter off a lawnmower. Now, that to me was probably the funniest idea as far as filtering goes, but it probably made the most sense. But nobody did it. Instead, people put tissue paper or paper masks or cloth masks on their face in the mistaken and rather naive belief that because the government told them to, that it must be right. Remember, this is the same government that can't defeat drugs, they can't defeat poverty, and they sure as hell can't defeat terror. Declare victory today in your life. Get out and enjoy, as I said from the very beginning. Enjoy your friends, enjoy your family, enjoy the daylight, enjoy that little measure of freedom they've given back to us. Enjoy a good cigar, like this good, affordable cigar I've been enjoying throughout the show. Speaking of which, I am now at the middle third of this Churchill cigar. It's going to give me probably an hour of good smoke time. It's still a very good cigar. It's consistently good. And that's why I recommend it for you as a good, affordable cigar to be part of your repertoire. Keep 4 or 5 in your cigar box and you're only dropping $20, $25. You've always got a good cigar and you've got one to hand your friends who are not dedicated cigar guys and aren't going to be off-put because you've handed them a paper-banded cigar. Just tell them, Flor de Olivas are good. And because they're at a good price, they're double good. Well, thanks for listening. And tune in again for I Smoke Cigars and I Know Things, the podcast with Doc Hanna. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Spotify. Just look for I Smoke Cigars and I Know Things, the podcast. I'm going to enjoy the rest of this cigar. I hope that you're enjoying your day. If you're having a cigar, I hope it's everything you want it to be. I will talk to you again soon. Adios, amigos.